Minnesota Green Corps member, and so I recently moved to Bemidji, and I've met quite a few people since coming here, and one of them was Barry Babcock, and we met through a Sustainable Tuesdays event, and he mentioned that he was working on this forum on the wolf hunt. And I'm not originally from this area, I'm actually from South Dakota, and so this is kind of a new issue for me, but I've been learning more and more about it, and tonight I'm really excited to learn about these different perspectives. So the Indigenous perspective and like the legal side, the environmental side, I'm really excited for those to kind of come together, and I can see what people are thinking and what's happening right now. So I'm here to learn primarily, and I have my own feelings about the wolf hunt, and they do very much align with the Indigenous perspective, and I'm hoping to kind of be able to understand both sides.
So you invited some of these folks here?
Yes, I did actually. I operate the Green Living Bemidji blog, and we have quite a decent sized listserv, and I definitely made sure to advertise that this event was going on. I really think that this is a critical issue that people in Bemidji need to be learning more about, since we have such a diverse community here, and there is some tension between different groups, and I think that this is something that we really need to have a dialogue about. And so I wanted to share it with as many people as possible, and I'm excited that I see a lot of people that have come out. There's well over, how many would you say?
There's probably close to 55, 60 people.
Yeah, I was gonna say about 60, 70. So
which is pretty good turnout for Bemidji.
It's an excellent turnout, and I'm glad I walked in here and this place was packed, and so I love to see that, and I'm really excited for the event to go on today.
All of a sudden they disappeared, and just being a kid, I didn't know why they disappeared, but I know now why they disappeared, because they put a bounty on them, and they were shooting them out of the planes. And this old gentleman that was sitting there, he was part of that. And he said, oh yeah, I used to do that. It's like, to me, I'm a hunter. I hunt, I gather, I fish, everything. To me, that's cowardism, shooting them out of a plane. I mean, really good sporting stuff, I don't even remember his name, but that kind of hurt me. As wolves, I worked, like you said, I worked 30 years in Northwest Angle, did inventory, been all over in the woods, and I said, well, I'm gonna sit down, and when they start talking about the wolf hunt, I said, well, I'm gonna count on my hands how many times I've seen a wolf in my career, and I couldn't even count animals. So how many times do they bother people? I don't think they bother anybody. They've never bothered me, and I've walked all over where maybe people haven't walked, doing inventory, and you see their tracks, but you never see them. One of the things that always made me, was this about 5 years ago, maybe, we were fighting fire one spring, and we were looking for the smoke, and we drove into this field. I said, oh man, look at that wolf, It was a big black wolf. He's just a monster, and just disappeared. And my cousin now, Ron Bolio, he passed away now, but he said, "Oh boy, that was a big wolf," And I always tell people this story, but we didn't see the other ones. There must have been a couple more chasing that deer, but we didn't see the deer right away. We turned around in the field, and the deer come running up to the pickup, because he knew that wolf wouldn't, bother anybody but a truck. It was really funny, because every time we stopped, that deer would stop and say, "Oh, come on, let's go." He's still there. He was doing his hunting, and we ruined it for him. But it just, and that deer ran in front. Every time I'd stop, the deer would stop and turn around and look at us like, are we going to move anymore? And he ran all the way out to the road with us, and then he ran into the woods and disappeared. I don't know if they would have caught him, but they have their right to hunt too. We're hunters and gatherers as Indian people, and just like bear, I couldn't shoot a bear, I couldn't shoot a wolf either. So there's a lot of things that you know, that were instilled in me from my grandparents and my dad, and nobody did stuff like that. And it's kind of hurtful to have them go, and we're actually studying them now on Red Lake. So we got a grant to do the study to find out how many wolves we actually have, packs on the reservation. And you know, we just start doing stuff like that, and then all of a sudden a hunt comes. And I said, man, you know, they're going to start hunting them? And I thought, hell, they ain't going to shoot any of them. I didn't think they could see them. They'd ever see them. And then they come out with, oh, they're trapping them too? Well, make up your mind whether it's a hunt or trapping. You know, I mean, it's like a roller coaster, or like a big storm coming. Let's do this, and then next time, let's do this too. And then pretty soon, there ain't gonna be wolves again. Because we don't even know how many we have now. But the ones I do see, you know, they're beautiful. You know, and I just couldn't see shooting one. You know, it's like me shooting my brother, you know. So, that's the feeling I get, and you know, they never come and ask us any questions until it was already, we were gonna have the hunt, you know. They never consulted the tribe. Like in the ceded lands, it's, you know, you have a 40-acre here, and then across the road there's state land. So then they get the hunt. You know, we have a sanctuary, but then they get to hunt them right across the road from where we're at, you know. And I don't think that's right. You know, they should come and ask us if we're one of the biggest landholders in, you know, in Indian country is Red Lake. So, I know we have Dave here. They did some trapping, and then last year and put a collar on one, and we only ended up getting one. I mean, they're hard to catch. You know, I don't know how these guys are doing it, catching them any other way, but the one that they did put a monitor on, I mean, I'll just let him talk a little talk, and I'll stop talking.
I want to let Dave Connor introduce Dave Price. Dave is employed by the Red Lake Band and Chippewa for 25 years. He's currently the administrative officer, but he's got his fingers just about everything. Dave Connor.
Okay, thanks. I'll just mention, I guess I'll just tell a little story. 30 years ago, I was taking a class at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. It was mammalogy. And at that time, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life, but I took that class. And one day we took a field trip up to the, I believe it was called the Kawishui Ranger Station up by Isabella, which was north of Duluth. And there at that time, they had two major research projects going on. And then there was bear research, which was led by Lynn Rogers, and then there was wolf research led by David Meach. And both of those were affiliated with the University of Minnesota. So our professor took us up there, and we got to meet and hear presentations by Lynn and Dave over the research they were doing. And then while we were there, a rare event happened, which was certainly rare at the time, but they actually trapped a wolf as part of the research. And you know, even Dave Meach was excited, you know, because we were going to go be able to see the wolf and how they work them up and collar them. And so we as students were all excited. And I can just say it was, you know, back then in the early 80s, you know, the wolf, you know, the numbers were very low, and the research was intense. And but it was basically a seminal moment for me that made me decide to get into fish and wildlife for a career, was the wolf. And I can only say I'm so glad to work for the Red Lake Tribe that, you know, they have a lot of firsts behind them, but one, of course, is protecting the wolf on a large portion of the state of Minnesota, which I certainly believe is the right path and direction. And prior to the council taking its action, it had its department, our department, beginning and doing certain types of initial research to learn more about the wolf population. And also, since upon delisting, there was nearly 1 million acres of land in the state of Minnesota where the state had no jurisdiction. That kind of drove us towards developing a management plan, and so that, which then gave the council the information they needed to take what action they took. But we're spending a lot of time trying to learn about the wolf in the Red Lake areas, and so one of our biologists, Dave Price, he's been working at Red Lake and wildlife areas for a little over 10 years, and we did start a research project, and I'll let him talk a little bit about it now.
There's not much to tell you, everyone told you everything. I've actually been at Red Lake for almost 12 years now. I was hired in July of 2001. I have to thank Red Lake for hiring me because it's just been a great experience. I get to see parts of the reservation that non-members normally don't. I get responsibility handed to me by the council and the membership to manage their natural resources, so I am very thankful for that. As a wolf manager, you're not actually managing wolves, you're managing people and habitat. And on Red Lake, I don't do anything with wolves other than try and monitor them. I'll get into our research in a little bit later. But I'm not going to talk down to you and tell you that wolves eat deer, blah, blah, blah. They do eat deer, depending on where they're at. They'll eat elk, they'll eat moose, they'll eat caribou, they'll drag down bison. But they also eat fox, they'll eat eggs, they'll eat birds, frogs, earthworms, grasshoppers. They've been known to chew on berries. They eat grass like dogs. A lot of that's not going to sustain them very long. And under good conditions, a wolf can feed himself every 5 to 6 hours if he's got, abundant food. On the other hand, he can go 2 weeks basically feeding himself or herself on just scraps, basically fasting themselves, chewing on bones, whatever. It's not prime. In lean years, the wolf populations will drop a little bit. That's not to say that they don't have an impact on deer populations. Like I said, the wolf we have collared has a territory of 130 square miles. Consider, if you put it in perspective, if you had a mountain lion basically feed on deer, he can take one deer and feed himself for up to 2 weeks. That same deer will last a pack about a day or two. So, pack size anywhere from 5, 10, 15 individuals, depending on their territory, food source, that kind of thing. Generally, the average we consider is probably about 7 per pack. Red Lake actually has between 16 and 18 packs which utilize their lands. The tribe solely controls, no input from the state whatsoever. The number I have is 607,000 acres of forest and habitat. The tribe controls almost 850,000 acres, but a lot of that's Red Lake, so we got to take that out. Wolves can't survive underwater, so. There's about, we figured when we started this 4 years ago, we knew the federal government was going to delist wolves. So being proactive, we wanted to get an idea of how many wolves were utilizing Red Lake land. At that point, we were just kind of figuring out where they were, how many packs we had, kind of the numbers. So what we did is we drove a lot of trails, drove a lot of roads, looked at a lot of spots on all the reservation lands, the diminished reservation, the ceded lands, the northwest angle. And we just basically located tracks and kind of got an idea of numbers, just informally that way. Once we kind of had an idea of where the wolves were using areas pretty heavily. We purchased 25 cutty-back, no-flash cameras. These are infrared cameras, not the flash. And we put these out for 3-4 months at a time, and then we change batteries and leave them out almost year-round. And we were able to get a more solid estimate of the numbers on Red Lake lands. That's why we know there's probably between 50 and 60 individual wolves on the diminished reservation. At the northwest angle, which is only accessible by going through Canada or crossing Lake of the Woods. We figure there's 2 packs, probably 10-15 individuals total. And that's primarily because there's not a lot of deer up there, because of the vast majority of the northwest angle is black spruce, tamarack swamp, not prime habitat for deer, so if you don't have the deer, you don't have the wolves. So there's probably 2 wolves up there, or 2 packs up there, I should say. The ceded lands, most of our information is based on the Minnesota DNR sharing their collar data with us. They estimated that they have 6 packs that they had collared. We doing just basically track surveys and that kind of thing. Added a couple more for Red Lake lands. And there's probably, there might be a couple more. It kind of depends on how big those packs are. So we kind of had an idea of how many wolves there were and how many packs there were, what areas they were using. But we didn't have a whole lot of science. We had a lot of travel. We had signs the wolves were in areas. So, the next step was basically to put together a management plan. So we put together a management plan, brought it to the council with our recommendations. In July of 2010, the Red Lake Band adopted their wolf management plan and declared their land to be a protective area for the wolf, and actually language dictates that it's a wolf sanctuary. So hunting on Red Lake lands is forbidden. So with that out of the way, the next step for us as a DNR monitoring, managing wolf entity, I guess, if you want to put it that way, we wanted to kind of figure out exactly where the packs were running and what habitat they were using, because we work a lot with the forestry department. They do a lot of, aspen cuts or, pine plantations, that kind of thing, and we just kind of wanted to get an idea of where the wolves were going, kind of on a yearly basis, on a weekly basis. So we started trapping wolves, and we thought we were going to trap everyone that was out there. No go. We started in May of last year. We actually had our first wolf in June, the end of June. He was a 78-pound male. We caught him on the butcher knife, by the butcher knife chain, which is in the southwest portion of the Diminished Reservation. He's 78 pounds. We got a collar on him. We took some blood samples. He's got an ear tag. He's number 1. And he's out there, and he's the one that has 130 square mile territory. So we had 1 wolf in a month, and we thought, hey, this is great. We went 2 more months before we had our second wolf. We actually caught a second wolf. It was a 12-pound pup. We didn't put a collar on him. He slipped it within 12 hours. Because the collars we have are designed for adult wolves. We did try to pad the collar with tape padding on the inside. It was a pretty snug fit, but I was kind of in charge of padding it. And I didn't want to make it too snug because pups grow really fast. And I wanted to try and get at least a couple weeks information out of them, so I didn't make it too tight. It was tight enough that it would stay on. But what I forgot to do was, because there's 2 ends on the strapping on the collar, I padded the inside of the collar, but then the ends have to overlap, so there was no padding there, and I forgot to secure the ends of the collar. So basically what happened was he just slipped the ends out and just slipped his head out. So within 12 hours, he was gone. I actually had a PowerPoint put together that would show you where these guys went and what we're doing. But basically what you do when you trap a wolf is you put a leg hold trap, and what we are using is a number 7, what they call an easy grip. It's basically a long spring trap. The metal part of the jaw is offset 3/4 of an inch. It's a laminated jaw, it's rubber teeth. Basically the rubber teeth fill that gap, so a wolf steps in it. It bruises their legs a little bit, but it doesn't draw blood, it doesn't cut skin, it doesn't remove hair. And when the traps we have a 6-foot chain with a drag on it, so these traps are not staked down in place. The wolf is able to put their foot in, drag it off in the brush, and then kind of like a dog, he's been, defeated. He just kind of cowers down and kind of waits for you to come. And then basically you go in we use Y poles, we don't use snare poles. We basically just pin him to the ground, make sure he's not going to snap at anyone, administer our ketamine, xylazine mix, depending on how heavy he is. And then you basically back off and let the drugs put him to sleep. And then we basically bring him to where we're going to work him up. Basically, like I said, we check him for ticks, mange and that kind of thing. I mentioned mange because at the Northwest Angle in 2010, 2011, at least half to 60% of the wolves up there had mange. It was also in the red fox population. We have not really seen it flare up there again. Like I said, we have cameras out almost year-round up there, and they have not really shown up with too much mange. And it seems that despite what most people have an idea of mange, the wolves were kind of surviving into the spring. So we'd pick up a wolf in, say, January, February. He would have mange, and a lot of them were 3/4 bald, basically from the shoulders back. They didn't have any hair. And then in the spring, they would show up again. So they were making it through the winter. At least a lot of the individuals were. I can't say for sure that they all made it through, or that a large proportion have made it through, but several individuals looked like they were able to overcome mange somehow. And all mange is usually it's just a mite. It gets into the skin, irritates them, and then they basically chew and rough their skin out because it itches so much. And I don't know if it's because the skin gets thick enough that it basically chokes the mites out, that maybe these wolves are surviving that way. I don't know that for sure. You'd have to talk to a veterinarian, I guess. But anyway, we have one wolf on collar. He's still on collar. We still get information from him every other day. Our collars are basically set up to take a location every 4 hours, and it will store that data on board. And then every other day, that collar sends us an email, and we can figure out where he went the last couple days. So it's really neat. The collar right now is kind of acting up a little bit. It's probably because of the thicker fur. The antenna is not really capable or not able to reach the satellite, but we are getting information from him yet. He made one trip on the lake, or on the Red Lake, Lower Red Lake. He was, I think, 1.5 miles offshore. But managing wolves, it's difficult. They don't stay on Red Lake land. Like Al mentioned, we can say we can protect them all we want, but they wander off the reservation lands and they're fair game. Part of that's because there's several people out there who just want a wolf pelt on the wall. I don't understand it. You can't eat a wolf. I'm one of those people that if I shoot something, I'm going to utilize it. There's a large population of people out there who think that if they're not seeing deer and they're seeing a lot of wolves, that the wolves are killing all the deer. Well, a wolf is not going to be in an area that doesn't have deer. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense for them to hang out someplace that they can't feed. So just because you're seeing wolves doesn't mean there's no deer in the area. But a lot of people have that misconception that the deer are decimating deer herd, the wolves are decimating deer herd. And this is not substantiated because following the severe winters of 95, 96, when the deer herd just crashed through the basement and there weren't any wolves on the landscape, or there weren't any deer on the landscape, the wolves numbers maintained or actually increased during that period. But then following those severe winters when, actually there weren't that many deer out there and there was a lot of wolves in perspective, the deer herd took off. They increased their numbers like there weren't any wolves out there. So it wasn't the wolves that were dropping their numbers. It was weather, disease, things like that. Human harvest was another aspect. There's a lot of things that goes into managing stuff like deer. People like deer, you know, on Red Lake. It's basically a very important food item. You know, there's people out there who hunt for their families, their extended families, the elders, so they need to have deer. I'm not saying, you know, take all the wolves off the landscape so deer can just come flying back, because it's just not going to happen that way. There's something else that, you know, if you're not seeing deer out there, maybe the deer are smarter. The last couple of years, a lot of the hunters are saying they weren't seeing deer. We had drier years. Maybe the deer were less dense. I don't know. I know at the Northwest Angle, people up there a lot of them don't look favorably on wolves. They have pet deers that come to the resort or the resorts and things like that. And as far as jurisdiction for the wolves go, it's a very difficult thing. Red Lake does own 80% of the Northwest Angle. It shares a border with Canada. So if we call our wolf on Red Lake land at the angle and it goes into Canada, we have to call Canada to have them help us recover that collar if they drop it or if that wolf gets killed. I know Band 33, which is directly north of the Northwest Angle, majority of their membership do not hunt wolves. Band 37 has a lot of wolf hunters. So, you know, it's another thing we have to deal with. You know, we're not only talking state, federal, international, we're talking tribe to tribe, band to band. So it's really a convoluted management scheme. We can say we're going to do this, but in essence, not everyone's going to follow that. I know in Minnesota, the tribes in Minnesota have a very large proportion of land that wolves use. And they had no input into this hunt. This wolf hunt came almost out of nowhere. I know in July of 2011, the state had basically modified their legislation dictating that the wolf was a small game species and that they could bypass the 5-year waiting period that normally comes associated with the delisting of a wolf or of a species off the endangered species list. They basically put legislation in place almost a whole year before the wolves came off the list, saying that they could, in fact, have a hunt if they wanted to. And then, you know, this whole, you know, we're going to take 16,000 applicants. Out of that, we're going to pick 6,000 licensees. They're going to harvest 400 animals. They took 412. They almost hit their goal. They were just a little over. I don't know what went into that management decision. I don't know why 400 out of, say, 3,600 individuals was their goal. I know when it was handed over to the states and their tribes, the federal government gave up their right to do the nuisance animal removal, which means that, you know, livestock producers that were losing animals could call USDA APHIS, and they would send out a trapper to remove those specific individuals that were coming into their cattle or sheep operations. When the wolf went off the list, the federal government no longer did that. So the state was going to have to pick that up. I don't know if that went into the decision. There are state trappers who are doing the same thing I am. We're out there trapping, putting collars out, trying to figure out what they're using. We have talked to them. We usually have a pretty good relationship with the Minnesota DNR. We have a relationship with the people at Agassiz National Wildlife Refuge. So, I mean, information goes back and forth, but in this case, this kind of came out of nowhere. We weren't really consulted. I know the tribes were brought to the round table prior to my career at Red Lake. There was a wolf round table that went out, and, you know, the tribes were invited to that. Why weren't we invited to this one? I don't know. state made a decision, and they made it without tribal input, as far as I know. Wisconsin did the same thing. I think they harvested 200 animals, or that was their goal anyway. And Michigan was online to have a hunt this year too, but they decided at the last minute to kind of hold off and wait to see what happened in Minnesota and Wisconsin. That's kind of what I know. Are there any questions, science-wise?
Do you have any idea what taking 400 wolves might do to this year's population?
I don't have any good idea. I mean, if you're talking removing, an eighth to a ninth of a population, I mean, that's a pretty big hit. There are possibilities that, the packs could fill that up pretty quick. Wolves do move around, especially young males. They will go out and they'll establish new packs. They'll steal, young females from other packs. Pups are basically the crux of the whole thing. You can have one or two females actually pull off a litter in a pack, depending on the pack and food availability, that kind of thing. If you're talking maybe an average of 4 to 6 pups, not all those pups make it to adulthood. You get injury, you get diseases, they get attacked, they get pulled down by other packs. It's a hard life for a wolf pup. Not all of them make it to adult. Not all of them survive hardly at all. Then you throw things like distemper and mange and rabies and things like that out there too. It's kind of hard to say if the wolf population is going to come back from this real quick or if it might be a while. I heard somewhere that they were going to have a hunt in 2013, but I don't know that for sure. It could just be people thinking it's going to happen or whatever. But I do know there are a few Red Lake members that did apply for wolf licenses. I don't know why that is. Knowing tribal, it's individuals. People feel differently about wolves. I think the majority, when we did our questionnaire, they'd never seen a wolf. They couldn't tell you, the difference between a wolf and a coyote. And they never saw one. They were happy to have them out there. And they really didn't weigh in on removing them because of the deer herd. There were a few people that said, I haven't shot, a dozen deer last year. It's got a dozen of the wolves. Let's take a few of them out. But that's just individual opinion. The diminished reservation, the wolves there probably aren't going to be impacted that much. The wolves at the northwest angle probably aren't going to be impacted that much. There's not that many people who hunt those areas up there. There is state land up there. They do have access to some of that stuff, but there's just not that many people that live up there that would hunt wolves at the northwest angle. The ceded lands, like Al was saying, you're talking state land right next to tribal land, and these parcels are just scattered. There's no real big chunks anywhere. So to say that those wolves are sanctuary and tribal lands is probably wishful thinking. I know there's a lot of wolves up there. I talk to Gretchen pretty regularly, and they always have wolves howling behind North Camp headquarters there. And we know they're there because when we did our track surveys, when we do our surveys in the summer, we basically have a 3-foot circle with we just call them stinky discs. It's a plaster Paris about an inch disc that's impregnated with fatty acids. It's just horrendous smell. And basically it's just a snapshot. If a wolf comes by, if it's in the area, they'll leave their track in there. We have wolves that actually pull the rocks out of the circle. We don't know if they ate the disc. There was no sign of the disc. They just, I don't know what it was, but and in that area of North Camp, they were really active on a lot of the roads in that area. So I know there's a good pack in that area. But I haven't had any information coming out of the hunt.
How does limestone affect
there is probably, I'm not going to call it Lyme disease. They probably pick up the microbe but it doesn't really affect them that much from what I hear.
Not like the dog.
Not like, I don't know. It's different physiology, and from what I understand, Lyme disease does not really impact the wolf population. I could be wrong. I haven't really had a lot of veterinarians chime in on this, but from what I'm hearing, it's not a big factor.
What about the anaplasmosis, canine anaplasmosis?
Anaplasmosis?
Yeah.
I have no information. I don't really know much about that in the whole population. I'm sure they did pick it up, and I'm sure they have markers for it, but I don't know for sure.
How many counties did someone said the ceded lands are covered or red and what counties are?
I don't know. I don't know all the counties, and I'll let.
Next up, Rena Crow and Sandra Skinaway. Rena's going to do some speaking. Is next up. These sisters of Maine and co-founders of the Northwoods Wolf Alliance have made the sacrifice for Brother Wolf. Since before the wolf hunt started, they've been on the street corners of Duluth or some other town in northern Minnesota, rain or shine, demonstrating against the hunt and urging people to speak out. Their dogged determination has been an inspiration to many of us. Rena Crow.
Thanks very much. I'm really honored to be here, and even more honored to see you on a cold day like today. We got such a good crowd here to come and learn what's going on with Minden. I am sorry to report Sandy is not able to join us today. She's in the hospital. She is doing well, so don't worry about her. She's just going to be out of the game for a couple days and then back at it. And Sandy and I met a while back in Duluth, and we met out of our concern for the sulfide mine that they're wanting to put in White Lakes, just north on the Iron Range, just north of Duluth. And we were doing some work with Protect Our Monoman. And I really, I don't read the mainstream newspaper. I don't read the Duluth News Tribune. I get most of my news and information online. And many years ago, not long after I first came to Duluth, around 97 or 98, I had met Mr. Bob Gishiimenaa. And Bob was at the time sitting on the Wolf Roundtable. I was not part of the Wolf Roundtable, but I knew through Bob, became acquainted with many people that were there, and I tried to provide some support kind of from behind the scenes and looking up things on the internet, maybe making copies. And at that time, a bunch of us sort of formed a coalition, and we did a wolf walk in 1998 in Duluth, and in anticipation of delisting and to draw attention to that management plan that Bob and others were working on. And I have to admit, I'm ashamed to say this, but it's the truth. I kind of fell asleep. I've done a lot of grassroots activism. It's been what I've done for most of my life. Sometimes I have organizing jobs that I get paid at, sometimes I don't. But I've always been an activist. I've always been an advocate. My parents introduced me to that way of life when I was just about 6 or 7 years old. I'd be on campus somewhere tabling for one group or another, and to me it's just what you do. So I really should have known better, but I believed that having poured so much in terms of resources into the management plan, having tribal representatives sitting on that round table, having people from animal welfare and wolf protection groups, having people from the sports hunting and lobbies there, the livestock industry. When you get a group of people that are that diverse together and deal with issues involving such different paradigms, such different worldviews, and so many and different values, and this group of people was able to reach a consensus. We have meetings for the Northwoods Wolf Alliance in Duluth, and even if there's 10 of us, and we're generally much closer together in ideology and values, it would be a real challenge to come to consensus, a complete, everybody being willing to sign on to a particular policy. So I thought that was one heck of an accomplishment, and quite frankly, I just did not believe that the Minnesota DNR or the governor would have the nerve to completely disregard a management plan that so many people worked so hard on and where they achieved consensus. So I wasn't aware until fairly late in the game. I knew that wolves were going to be delisted. I knew that it happened at the federal level, but I was unaware that Minnesota was ready to go with a wolf hunt, or with a plan for a wolf hunt so quickly. So Sandy and I met in the context of working on the sulfide mine issue, and then bumped into each other again, and I had heard, oh no, there's a wolf hunt coming this fall, how did that happen? And I was really struggling I hadn't met Maureen yet from Howling for Wolves down in the cities, but Sandy had. So I was looking for some people in northern Minnesota, in Duluth in particular, to work on, to start reorganizing. At one point in time, there was a pretty good network of people in different parts of the state that were all interested and concerned in protecting Maingan, that were in touch with each other, and that I realized we need to rebuild that web, build that network, put it back together. And so Sandy and I met, we bumped into each other in downtown Duluth, and I said, hey, do you know anybody working on the wolf issue? And Maureen had asked her to have a meeting in Duluth, and so that's how we got started. I believe that was late July or early August, and Sandy has taken the lead every single Saturday. We had decided we were going to have our first rally in Duluth that very next weekend. And Sandy got that going, and Sandy took the lead in having, again, rain or shine, as Michael said, and some really, really horrible weather and conditions. We've been out there. Sandy for sure. I broke my foot and missed a few, but Sandy has been out there every single Saturday until very recently on that. We've dubbed the corner of Lake and Superior Street in downtown Duluth is now Maingan Corner. So the media, passers-by, it sounds like a small thing to go out there. It's not lobbying, it's not debate, it's not hard, but just being out there, that consistent presence on that corner, let the media get to know who we were. So when we started doing that, when the coverage that I would see periodically in the newspaper pretty much portrayed the issue as you have hunters and livestock people versus a handful of tree-hugging hippies. And, nothing could be further from the truth. But we had allowed, by not meeting regularly, not doing media, not organizing, not being out there, not having that visibility, as we learned, our opponents, the livestock industry, and not even all of it, but some of them, the sport hunting lobbyists, they never stopped doing this work. They saw that management plan didn't slow them down a bit. When Dave mentioned how quickly the wolf hunt was put out there on the table after delisting, that's a dead giveaway that these people never stopped. They were just ready, as soon as that delisting occurred, to jump in there with a hunt. So I promise that I will never go to sleep again. I know, and that's one of the reasons that we formed the group, the Northwoods Wolf Alliance. We had met Maureen in Howling for Wolves, and Sandy was working with her, and we thought about, well, gee, should we try to do a Howling for Wolves Duluth or some kind of a branch? And we realized that regardless of what happens with the hunt this year and in the immediate future, that there's going to be forever a need to do regular education, not only about Maingan, but about all non-human predators. And so we decided our group is a little bit different. I didn't anticipate Idle No More at the time, but Sandy and I sat and we thought about this issue, and we thought strategically, when we look at the wolf hunt as a statewide issue, what's going to need to happen here? And we realized, we're thinking about the mines, we're thinking about Maingan, we're thinking about all these issues that are coming out in Minnesota that we need to deal with. And we realized that from a policy angle, if we're going to have successes in Minnesota, we're going to need to be able to find a way for Anishinaabeg and non-Anishinaabe people to come together, work together, build coalitions, and go, go into these meetings and approach legislators and policymakers with more of a unified voice. So that has proven to be an extremely challenging process because our membership is about half to 2/3 Anishinaabe, and then the rest is not, mostly white folks. So some, occasionally, but the population in Duluth is mostly Anishinaabe anyway. And the communities really do things very differently, and so some of the meetings, we've had some challenges keeping on the agenda and teaching people that you don't interrupt elders, but you've got to start somewhere. So nothing has gone like I expected it was going to go or like we planned, but we just knew this work, this time was coming, and it was something that we were going to need to do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, I saw the agenda for the meeting, and we had people speak about science, and then myths were brought up, and my name was kind of behind that. And I know that there are many more people, that we have a couple more people to speak and probably some questions. So I just want to hit on a couple of those things. And, one of the things that we need to remember is that when the United States was founded as a political entity, the people who came here, settlers, colonists, were acting out on certain cultural beliefs, certain cultural myths. And one of those myths is that people are needed to manage nature. And so I really appreciated what you had to say about managing wolves. You're not managing wolves, you're managing habitat and human beings. And human beings are relatively recent on the face of the earth compared to the other animals. And I just wonder, what in the world did nature do for all these hundreds of thousands of years before one particular culture came and decided, we know more than the creator, we've got to go out here and manage all of this. And as I see it, I look at the history of what has happened to non-human predators in this country, and if you look back at the 20s and 30s, the USDA, they publish, I think their website even still has photographs, you'll see cougar skulls just piled in huge masses. Wiping out buffalo, of course, that wasn't about predation, but it was about affecting indigenous people and making it very much harder for them to be able to eat and live and be self-sufficient. So there was a vilification, this myth, that was perpetuated to facilitate, part of that westward expansion that was desired on the part of the government was agriculture was a big part of that. And you want to accommodate farmers and you want to accommodate ranchers, and one of the ways you do that is by putting bounties on non-human predators. So there was a lot of vilification, and some of that vilification is still very much with us today. And I see this wolf hunt as really a sign that a good part of that dominant culture in this country wants to take a step back. Step back to the back to the 1970s when, any kind of human predation is fine, that's morally acceptable, but if you're a non-human and you're a predator, you're evil, you're vile, you're mean, you're wicked. And this is a really scary thought to me because there's a place in nature for everybody, and there's a reason everybody is here. So I think that there were goals that had nothing to do with science. They had nothing to do with appropriately managing anything. And I think that we're really coming back to that. And when I go out in the community and talk to people, I'm pleased to be able to report that 90% of the feedback that we've gotten standing on those street corners has been, or wherever we go, if we've spoken at the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, I've done some talks at the University of Minnesota Duluth, wherever I go and speak, wherever our group goes, the feedback from the public is overwhelmingly positive. About 95% of people are right on, love what you're doing. And in fact, it's been very difficult. I like debate. That's one of the things I'm good at. So I've been looking for some wolf hunters who will debate me, and do it. They're really brave when it's on the internet, and they can make some anonymous ad hominem attack and call you a name. But I've been doing this work long enough, that's not going to upset me. But I have identified one person up in Virginia. Ironically, it's another woman. And so I plan to contact her again next week and see if she'll come down to Duluth and we can do a debate. So I don't know what she knows about the facts, but at least just getting out there and starting to have this discussion. Because one of the myths that's out there is that Maingan kills for fun. And I'm not necessarily maybe the biggest fan of David Meach, but I did go hear him speak at a panel discussion this last fall in Duluth, and he brought something very interesting. He brought a video clip of a wolf, well, actually it was 2 wolves, and we got to watch as they hunted and stalked this deer and brought the deer down, and of course the wolf jumped up and bit the, and I think part of the point of that was to make us all recoil in horror, and didn't have that effect on me. But what was more interesting about that clip is, I imagine since we're here in Bemidji, a lot of people here are hunters, you've been out in the woods, you've done the work, you understand it's hard work to do that. A lot of city folk don't understand that. And seeing this clip, the work that these wolves went through to bring down that deer. It's not the kind of thing that an animal, we heard wolves eating if they can every 5 or 6 hours, and the amount of food that they need to sustain themselves. There's no way that an animal living in a state of nature who needs to have that net caloric benefit is going to go out and run around and expend this kind of energy just for kicks. But that kind of vilification, that myth that, well, human predators are one thing, but non-human predators are evil, is still very much with us right now. And I wanted to talk a little bit real quickly about 2 other myths that I think are very much affecting this hunt. And one was, of course, the wolves killing for fun. I'm going to just walk over here. I've got a couple of notes here that I made. When I go up to the range, and I talk to people in Virginia, I talk to people in Ely, what I hear are these stories about how wolves are on the porches and coming up, and they're taking dogs, and they're taking cats, and I've had people wag their finger in my face and ask me if I wanted to be the one to have my child hauled off into the woods by Maingan. Now, for some reason, I come to places like Beach Lake or Red Lake, and nobody tells me those stories here. And I wonder what's going on up there in Ely and what's really happening. Because in this day of video cameras, everybody has a phone with a camera on it now, and I can't tell you how many times these folks have really chewed me out about, don't you understand the threat that these animals are posing to not only pets, but our children. And I can't, would you believe I have had not one person show me even one photograph of a wolf creeping up on their porch to eat their dog? So I find, but that myth is very much out there. And so I think what happens is one person maybe goes to have a beer at the bar, and their buddy sitting next to him says, oh geez, this wolf came up and threatened my dog, and then it becomes a first-hand story to that, and it gets spread around like that. So I really question whether or not anything like that is going on. The other myth that I would like to address that's a modern-day myth is this business about wolves being such a big threat to livestock. I don't know how many of you know the details of the management plan and the policy, and we've got some other people here that I think are going to speak to that a little bit more specifically, but just in a very general sense, this is northern Minnesota, and wolves have been crowded out. Wolves are remaining on something like 5% of their original territory. So they've really been crowded into a very small amount of space in terms of what their traditional range was. And so people come up here with their domestic animals, their cows, their sheep, their pigs, their turkeys, whoever it may be, and feel that they have this sense of entitlement to push Maingan out of their hunting grounds even further. And as a philosophical matter, me personally, I believe if you come into northern Minnesota and you come into Maingan's territory and push them out of their hunting grounds, that deer, that cow, that turkey, that sheep that you lose once in a while is merely a tax to your elder.
Here, here.
one of the reasons I'm in northern Minnesota is I very much value truly wild space, and this is just the edge where, you know, you can start getting into the real woods and seeing and hearing wolves and catching a sight of a bear every now and again, and that really means a lot to me. And so I think that we really, you know, need to keep in mind that there's nothing sacred about a cow, a sheep, a pig, or a turkey being in northern Minnesota. I'm not sure they belong here. But if they do, you know, if they're going to be here, I don't think it's a real tragedy that once in a while my Indian takes one. My understanding, by the way, is that in 2011 there were 91 cases of wolf depredation on livestock in Minnesota, and over 200 wolves were killed in retaliation. So the myth that there is an economic problem for farmers and ranchers is very questionable, because number one, the management plan and current policy allows for compensation to these farmers and ranchers if a wolf does take livestock for market value of that animal, and then when we're retaliating by killing off supposedly nuisance wolves, I don't see the injury that exists to ranchers and farmers. So I'm gonna go to one more myth here that I would like to point out, and one that I think is really relevant, and this doesn't pertain, obviously the tribes in Minnesota have a different relationship with the government than, you know, the people of the state as a whole do. But one of the things that Tom Landwehr was quoted as saying, and I believe he was, this was in an interview with Minnesota Public Radio, people go into a lot of explanations for why we're having this hunt. And I don't want to necessarily give Tom Landwehr too much credit, but at the same point in time, sometimes people really do just say exactly what's going on. And he made a statement to the effect that, well, you know, he thought about doing the science. People have made the point here that part of that roundtable plan, part of that management plan that came out of the roundtable was that before a wolf hunt could take place, the DNR was supposed to do a number of things, one of which is do some real good science and really get an understanding for what the numbers of wolves are in Minnesota, what the population density is. Obviously, you can't extrapolate from a county from northern St. Louis County to southern Minnesota. That's just not, you know, that's not good science, that's not good math. He said he thought about doing the science. He said he thought about having the public comment period that I believe is also required by that management plan before a hunt can take place, but that he decided not to because he owed his primary constituency, which he named as the sport hunting lobbies and sport hunters in Minnesota, and his secondary constituency, which he named the livestock owners. He said he owed those constituencies a hunt this year. And I think that we have had agencies selling out for so long that a lot of people, that didn't really sound funny to people. But that's a myth. The idea that either the livestock industry or the sport hunting lobby are the constituents of the DNR. We are the constituents of the DNR. Us, the people. Wolves are held in the public trust. Wildlife belongs to you, and me, and her, and him, and it doesn't belong to people who have economic interests or the sports hunters who apparently want to kill for fun. So it's really important, I think, as we continue to do this work, to communicate particularly to the policymakers in the state as a whole, the governor, representatives, elected officials, both at the state and local levels, and let them know that we want this agency back. These animals belong to us. To the extent that the DNR even attempted to find out where the public stood on the management of our wolves, in light of federal delisting, they had a non-scientific poll on their website, and 79 point, and I don't remember the fraction of a percent or fraction there, but over 79% of the respondents said that they were not in favor of a wolf hunt in Minnesota. Last night I saw a link, the Star Tribune from the Twin Cities had another unscientific poll, and 83% of respondents to that poll are opposed to the wolf hunt in Minnesota. So the DNR is an agency who's supposed to be listening to that voice. So I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. I think that we need to work on a variety of levels, a variety of strategies, a variety of tactics to end this thing. But certainly, if we, we as citizens of Minnesota have every right to expect and demand that this stop. So with that, I will hand the floor over to the next speaker.
If you're going to contact the governor's office, or if you're going to contact the commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources, regardless of anything else that comes out from the state this year about this wolf hunt, we have to tell them tribes manage the wolf hunt within the exterior boundaries of their reservations. Okay? Now, I don't have the number in my head right now, but just about every, maybe all the Ojibwe tribes here in Minnesota closed the wolf hunt within their reservation boundaries last fall, okay? The 1854 Authority even took it upon themselves to close 6 million acres of the 13 million acres of that 1854 Treaty Authority. Between all the tribes, the treaty authorities, the Fish and Wildlife Service, game refuges, and the state parks. You know, we closed nearly 8 million acres of Minnesota land to wolf hunting. So, we have that right. Okay, this is a right. This is not something that, you know, the great white father somewhere gave us. These are rights we reserved, we retained in our treaties. I know there's a lot of skeptics in the room who are going to look at me kind of funny when I say this, but I have to say this. Treaties with tribes are the single largest environmental protection tool available to all of us. Okay? We need to get that in our brains. Treaties with tribes are the single largest environmental protection tool available to all of us. So, you know, do what you can. Everybody has to do it, you know, everybody has to step forth on this one. You know, as I said, I'm in spitting distance of 60. I'm tired, you know. I'd like to be able to, you know, just step away from this at some point. And maybe with all your help and support, I can do that. No, I just got one more thing, and I will shut up. February 28th, over at the White Earth Tribal and Community College in Winona, we're having the White Earth Wolf Conference, okay? The White Earth Wolf Conference, I don't know that Indian people have ever come together around the issue of wolves specifically anywhere, here or anywhere else in North America. I don't know. But I do know that in August of this year, or September, yeah, it was August of this year, The White Earth Indian Reservation Tribal Council declared the White Earth Reservation a wolf sanctuary. All the land within the exterior boundaries of the reservation to be wolf sanctuary. So we're going to take this a few steps further now. We have that declaration. There's some management stuff evolving. But there's going to be 3 tracks, 3 parts to this conference. One is going to be the science and wolf biology. Another track is going to be the politics and the legal status of wolves and tribes within this mix of the state and the federal laws and rules. Then the last piece is we're going to go way, way deep inside this cultural and this historic relationship between Anishinaabeg, So I put a few papers over there on the coffee table. And registration is not online yet. It'll be up this week sometime. But I do have some registration forms right here, actually, if some of you know you want to come to that. But we are asking people to pre-register because we have limited capacity, okay? And we have limited space and we have limited ability to feed people. So, we're asking everyone to please pre-register so that we have some sense of where this thing is headed. So with that, miigwech to you all for coming out, and hope to see you in the trenches soon.